There is a question that quietly lives inside many hearts on the twin flame journey. A question that is rarely spoken out loud, because admitting it feels uncomfortable, even shameful. And that question is this: if I truly believe this is my twin flame, why am I still waiting? Waiting for a message. Waiting for a sign. Waiting for the universe to give confirmation. Waiting for the day they come back, apologize, awaken, or finally choose you. At first glance, waiting looks innocent. It looks like patience. It looks like loyalty. It even looks like faith. But beneath the surface, waiting often carries a very different energy. An energy we don't want to admit. Fear. Fear of losing something sacred. Fear of being wrong. Fear that this connection, which feels so real, might slip through your fingers forever. And this is where many twin flames get stuck. They tell themselves they are trusting divine timing. But inside, their nervous system is tense. Their mind is constantly scanning reality for clues. Their heart feels suspended, as if life hasn't truly resumed yet. So today, we're going to explore something very subtle, but deeply transformative. The difference between waiting and trusting. Because these two states may look similar on the surface, but energetically, they come from opposite places. And understanding this difference can completely shift how you experience your twin flame journey. A question that changes everything. Let me ask you something gently. When you think about your twin flame right now, do you feel calm? Or do you feel restless? Do you feel grounded in yourself? Or do you feel like a part of you is on hold? Because your answer reveals more than you realize. Waiting always has a hidden timeline attached to it. Even if you don't consciously acknowledge it. Waiting says, I will be okay when this happens. I will feel whole again when they return. I will finally relax once I know where this is going. Trusting, on the other hand, doesn't need a timeline. And that difference changes everything. Why waiting feels so natural on the twin flame path. Let's be honest for a moment. The twin flame connection is intense. It doesn't enter your life quietly. Shakes your identity. It awakens old wounds. It opens emotional depths you didn't even know existed. So when separation happens, your system panics. Not because you're weak. Not because you're unspiritual. But because something that felt like home suddenly feels out of reach. Waiting becomes a coping mechanism. It gives the mind something to hold on to. It creates the illusion of control. It whispers, just endure this phase and everything will make sense again. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Waiting is often fear wearing the mask of hope. Hope says, I believe. Fear says, but what if I lose this? And the nervous system can't tell the difference between the two when the attachment is strong. The hidden cost of waiting. When you are waiting, life subtly pauses. You may still function. You may still work, socialize, even smile. But deep down, there is a sense that something hasn't started yet. Like your real life is delayed. And this creates an invisible pressure. Pressure to interpret every sign correctly. Pressure to do healing right. Pressure to not mess up divine timing. Waiting makes you hyper-aware, hyper-vigilant. You check their social media. You reread old messages. You analyze dreams, numbers, synchronicities. And while these experiences can be meaningful, they become exhausting when fueled by fear. Because waiting asks a dangerous question over and over again. What if this never comes back? Trust does not ask that question. This is where trusting enters, quietly, calmly, without drama. Trust does not shout. Trust does not demand reassurance. Trust does not argue with reality. Trust simply knows. Not in the mind, but in the body, in the soul. Trust says, if this connection is of the soul, it cannot be lost. If this love is real, it doesn't need my anxiety to survive. If it belongs to me at a soul level, I don't have to chase it. And this is where many people misunderstand trust. They think trusting means believing their twin flame will come back. But that's not trust. That's expectation. True trust goes deeper. It says, even if the form changes, the truth remains. Even if we never reunite the way I imagined, nothing sacred was wasted. Even if this connection was meant to awaken me rather than stay, it was still real. And paradoxically, this level of trust is what actually raises your frequency. Waiting keeps the center outside of you. Here's a powerful distinction. When you are waiting, your center is outside of you. Your peace depends on someone else's actions. Your stability depends on timing you cannot control. Your sense of worth subtly depends on whether they choose you again. Even if you don't consciously think this way, your energy does. And energy never lies. Trust, on the other hand, brings the center back home. You stop outsourcing your wholeness. You stop negotiating your peace with the future. You stop needing life to look a certain way to feel okay. This doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means love no longer costs you yourself. The question that reveals where you are. So here is a question you can sit with honestly without judgment. If nothing changes externally, can I still feel complete? If the answer is no, you may be waiting. If the answer is yes, even if it's trembling, even if it's new, you are beginning to trust. And that transition is not dramatic. It doesn't happen overnight. It often happens quietly the moment you realize, I don't want my life to be on pause anymore. The irony of the twin flame journey. Here is one of the great ironies of this path. The more you wait, the heavier the connection feels. The more you trust, the lighter it becomes. Not weaker, lighter. Because it is no longer held together by fear. And when fear leaves, love can finally breathe. So if you are watching this and thinking, yes, this feels uncomfortably familiar, know this, there is nothing wrong with you. Waiting was a stage. A natural stage. A human stage. But it is not the destination. In the next part of this journey, we will go deeper into how waiting keeps the ego in control, how trust shifts you into soul alignment, and why true twin flame union never happens through force or fear. Because the highest form of love does not cling. It rests. And when love rests, it becomes unshakable. Waiting and trusting, two energies, two realities on the twin flame journey. Because the difference between waiting and trusting is not just emotional. It is energetic. It is neurological. And most importantly, it is spiritual. On the twin flame journey, nothing is random. Not the attraction. Not the separation. And certainly not the pain that follows. What you experience internally is always a reflection of the energy you are embodying. And waiting and trusting create two completely different inner realities. Waiting and the ego's need for control. Let's begin with waiting. Waiting is not wrong. It is not a failure. It is not a lack of spiritual growth. Waiting is the ego's attempt to survive uncertainty. The ego does not trust the unknown. It does not trust silence. It does not trust space. So when the twin flame connection triggers separation, the ego steps in and says, let me manage this. It wants answers. It wants timelines. It wants reassurance. Waiting gives the ego something familiar. Anticipation. Mental activity. Emotional attachment. Feels like doing something even when nothing is happening. But here is the key insight. Waiting is an energy of contraction. Your awareness narrows. Your attention collapses inward. Your life energy begins orbiting around one point, the other person. Even if you are working on yourself, the underlying question often remains, when will this pay off? That question alone reveals the ego's presence. The subtle transaction of waiting. Waiting often carries an unspoken transaction with the universe. Sounds like this. I am healing, growing, and being patient, so that I can get them back. Even if you never say it out loud, the energy feels it. And the universe always responds to energy, not words. This is why waiting often feels heavy, because it is effortful. It requires monitoring. It requires emotional labor. It requires holding tension. You are not resting in love. You are working for it. Trust is not passive, it is grounded. Now let's talk about trusting. Trust is often misunderstood as passivity. People think trusting means doing nothing, suppressing desire, pretending you don't care. That is not trust. That is dissociation. True trust is deeply embodied. It is when your nervous system no longer perceives the situation as a threat. Trust feels grounded, not numb. You still feel love. You still feel longing. But those feelings are not destabilizing. They don't pull you out of yourself. Trust expands rather than contracts. The energy of trust is expansion. When you move into trust, something subtle but powerful happens. Your energy returns to you. Your attention spreads back into your body, your life, your creativity, your purpose. You stop revolving around the twin flame connection and start allowing it to exist within a larger field of meaning. This does not weaken the bond, purifies it, because love that is rooted in trust does not demand proof. It does not rush the process. It does not argue with timing, simply allows. Why trust feels so uncomfortable at first. Here's something most people don't talk about. Trust can feel terrifying at the beginning, not because it's unsafe, but because it removes the illusion of control. When you stop waiting, you stop bargaining with the future. You no longer say, "Just give me this outcome, and I'll be okay." Instead, you say, "I choose to be okay now." And that moment can feel like stepping into free fall. Because the ego asks, "What if I let go and nothing happens?" Trust answers, "Then you still have yourself." And for someone who has built their sense of meaning around the twin flame connection, that answer can feel confronting. Waiting keeps the twin flame at the center. Let's look at this honestly. When you are waiting, the twin flame is still the center of your inner world. Even if they are absent physically, they are present energetically. Your moods rise and fall based on imagined outcomes. Your sense of peace depends on external movement. This creates imbalance. Not because love is wrong, but because no soul-level connection is meant to replace your center. Trust gently restores the correct order. You become the center again. The connection becomes a part of your life, not the axis around which everything turns. Trust does not mean detachment from love. This is crucial. Trust is not emotional withdrawal. You do not become cold. You do not shut down your heart. You do not pretend the connection doesn't matter. You simply stop gripping it. Love remains, but fear no longer rides along with it. And when fear leaves, love becomes clearer, quieter, more spacious. The paradox of union. Here is one of the deepest paradoxes of the twin flame journey. Union cannot be reached through waiting, because waiting implies lack, and lack cannot create wholeness. Union happens when both souls are no longer trying to complete themselves through the other. This does not guarantee physical reunion, but it does guarantee alignment. And alignment is the real goal. Sometimes alignment leads to reunion. Sometimes it leads to release. Sometimes it leads to a form of connection that transcends labels. But in all cases, alignment brings peace. A simple test of energy. Here is a gentle way to sense where you are right now. Ask yourself, when I imagine letting go of the outcome, do I feel relief or panic? Relief means trust is emerging. Panic means the ego is still holding the reins. Neither is wrong. Both are stages. But awareness changes everything. Why trust is the highest frequency of love. Trust says, I do not need to chase what is meant for me. I do not need to suffer to prove devotion. I do not need guarantees to stay open-hearted. This is the frequency where love becomes unconditional, not because it tolerates everything, but because it is no longer afraid of loss. And when love is no longer afraid, it becomes powerful, not dramatic, not intense, but steady, unshakable. So if you are realizing that you have been waiting, be gentle with yourself. Waiting was not a mistake. It was a bridge between fear and trust, between attachment and sovereignty, between ego love and soul love. And now the invitation is simple. You do not need to wait for love to begin. You are already allowed to live. In the next part, we will explore how trust changes the dynamic of separation, why surrender often triggers unexpected shifts, and how twin flame connections transform when fear is no longer in charge. Because the moment you stop waiting for love to arrive, love finally has space to stay. Separation is not a punishment. It is a recalibration of the soul. There comes a moment on the twin flame journey when the question changes. It is no longer, why did this happen to me? It becomes, what is this trying to teach me? And that moment marks the beginning of a deeper awakening. Because separation, as painful as it feels, is not a punishment. It is not a cosmic mistake. And it is not proof that the connection was an illusion. Separation is a recalibration. A profound energetic realignment that forces the soul to return to its own center. Why separation feels so devastating? To understand separation, we must first understand why it hurts the way it does. This pain is not ordinary heartbreak. It is disorienting, existential, sometimes even spiritual. Feels like losing someone and losing yourself at the same time, questioning your intuition, doubting your sanity, feeling connected and abandoned simultaneously. And this is because the twin flame connection doesn't just attach to the heart. It attaches to identity. So when separation happens, the nervous system interprets it as a threat to survival. Not physical survival, but emotional and existential survival. This is why separation often triggers anxiety, insomnia, obsessive thinking, a collapse of meaning. Your system is recalibrating. The soul's way of breaking misalignment. Here is a difficult truth that few people want to hear. Separation happens when the connection becomes misaligned with truth. Not because love disappeared, but because fear entered the driver's seat. When one or both souls begin seeking completion through the other, placing their worth in reunion, losing their sense of self, the connection can no longer function at a soul level. So separation intervenes, not to destroy the bond, but to protect it from distortion. Separation removes illusions ruthlessly. Separation strips away fantasies. It dissolves the story of, if we are together, everything will be okay. It forces you to confront what you were projecting onto the connection. Many twin flames unconsciously assign roles to each other. Savior, healer, missing piece, proof of worth. Separation dismantles these roles. And that feels brutal, because it leaves you face to face with yourself. Without distraction, without spiritual bypassing, without the comfort of shared intensity. Why waiting intensifies separation pain? This is where waiting and separation collide. When you wait during separation, you resist recalibration. You try to pause the process instead of moving through it. Waiting says, bring me back what I lost so I don't have to change. Separation responds, you cannot return to who you were. This tension creates suffering, not because separation is cruel, but because growth is non-negotiable. Trust allows separation to do its work. Trust changes how separation functions. Instead of interpreting separation as rejection, you begin to see it as instruction. You stop asking, how do I get them back? And start asking, what part of me is being called forward? Trust allows grief without collapse, love without obsession, longing without self-abandonment. And something subtle begins to happen. The pain loses its sharpness, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped fighting reality. Separation is where sovereignty is reclaimed. Here is the hidden gift of separation. It gives your power back. During the intensity of the connection, power is often externalized. Your emotions respond to their presence or absence. Your sense of meaning revolves around the bond. Separation cuts that cord. Painfully, abruptly, but effectively. It forces you to reclaim your emotional autonomy, your inner authority, your capacity to self-regulate. This is not abandonment. This is initiation. Why reunion cannot happen without separation. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the twin flame journey. People treat separation as an obstacle to reunion. In reality, separation is what makes authentic reunion possible. Without separation, the ego remains in charge. Dependency remains unchallenged. Love remains conditional. Reunion without recalibration would simply recreate the same imbalance. Different faces, same wounds. Separation ensures that if reunion happens, it happens from wholeness, not hunger. The moment separation shifts energetically, there is a moment, often quiet, often unnoticed, when separation changes its quality. It stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like space. You notice. Your breath is deeper. Your thoughts are clearer. Your life begins to expand again. This does not mean the longing disappears. It means longing no longer controls you. This is the moment trust replaces waiting. Separation is not about time, it is about alignment. Many people obsess over how long separation lasts. But separation does not operate on clocks. It operates on alignment. It lasts as long as fear is still driving choices, Identity is still fused with outcome. Love is still tied to validation. The moment alignment occurs, something shifts. Externally or internally. Sometimes both. A gentle truth. Here is something you may not want to hear, but need to feel. Separation does not guarantee reunion, but it guarantees awakening. And awakening is the deeper purpose of the twin flame journey. Some connections return in form. Some return as inner peace. Some dissolve into gratitude rather than attachment. But none are wasted. The question that ends resistance. There is one question that dissolves resistance to separation. If this experience was meant to bring me back to myself, can I allow it to succeed? When you can say yes, even softly, separation loses its grip. Because you are no longer fighting the lesson. You are embodying it. Separation is not the absence of love. It is love removing distortion. It is truth reclaiming space. It is the soul saying, return home, and then we'll see what remains. Surrender is not giving up. It is the end of inner resistance. There is a moment on the twin flame journey that cannot be forced. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be achieved through effort. And it cannot be faked. This moment is surrender. Not the kind of surrender that feels like defeat. Not resignation. Not numbness. But a deeper surrender. The collapse of inner resistance. This is the moment when control quietly loosens its grip, and something far more intelligent takes its place. Why control feels necessary, especially after separation. After separation, the nervous system craves certainty. It wants to know what went wrong, what to fix, what to do next. Control becomes the ego's final defense mechanism. It says, if I can understand this, manage this, optimize this, I won't have to feel this much pain again. So control shows up as constant self-analysis, spiritual over-efforting, trying to heal for an outcome, micromanaging emotions and reactions. This often disguises itself as growth, but beneath it lies fear. Fear of chaos, fear of powerlessness, fear of trusting life again. Surrender begins when exhaustion arrives. True surrender usually doesn't arrive through insight. It arrives through exhaustion. When the mind is tired of looping, when the heart is tired of negotiating, when the soul is tired of fighting reality, this is when something breaks open. Not dramatically, but quietly. You stop trying to control how this story unfolds. Not because you no longer care, but because control no longer works. What surrender actually is. Let's clarify something important. Surrender is not giving up on love, shutting down emotionally, deciding the connection meant nothing. Surrender is the release of resistance. It is the moment you stop arguing with what is. You allow grief without trying to fix it. You allow longing without chasing it. You allow uncertainty without needing answers. And in that allowance, tension dissolves. The collapse of control is an energetic shift. When control collapses, the energy of the connection changes. Not outwardly at first, but internally. You notice. Your body feels less tight. Your breath deepens. Your thoughts slow down. You are no longer bracing. And this is crucial, because bracing keeps you locked in survival mode. Surrender signals safety to the nervous system. And when safety returns, clarity follows. Why surrender feels so scary? Surrender feels dangerous to the ego, because the ego equates control with safety. Letting go feels like, what if I stop trying and lose everything? But surrender does not remove discernment. It removes struggle. It does not make you passive. It makes you present. And presence is powerful. The difference between letting go and losing. This is where many people get confused. They think letting go means losing, but letting go is internal. Losing is external. You can let go of control without letting go of love. You can release expectations without abandoning connection. You can surrender outcomes without denying truth. Surrender does not sever the bond. It removes distortion from it. What happens when you stop forcing healing? There is a subtle violence in forcing healing. Trying to fix yourself quickly so you can be worthy of reunion. Trying to bypass pain so you can appear evolved. Trying to reach enlightenment so the universe rewards you. Surrender ends this transactional mindset. Healing becomes honest, slow, organic. You stop asking, "What do I need to do to be chosen?" and start asking, "What do I need to feel whole?" That shift changes everything. Surrender restores inner authority. One of the most profound effects of surrender is the return of inner authority. You stop outsourcing validation to signs, synchronicities, or predictions. You trust your internal sense of truth, not because you are certain of outcomes, but because you are grounded in yourself. This is sovereignty, and sovereignty is essential for any soul-level union. Why surrender often triggers external shifts. Here is one of the paradoxes of surrender. When you stop trying to control the connection often changes. Not always in the way you expect, but in the way alignment requires. Sometimes, communication resonates unexpectedly. Emotional charge softens. Clarity emerges. Sometimes, the attachment dissolves peacefully. The longing transforms into gratitude. The connection integrates internally. Surrender does not guarantee reunion, but it guarantees truth. Surrender is where trust fully embodies. Trust becomes real in surrender, not as a concept, not as an affirmation, but as a lived experience. You feel it in your body. I can survive uncertainty. I can remain open without clinging. I can love without losing myself. This is where waiting ends, because you are no longer postponing life. You are living it. The quiet power of non-resistance. There is immense power in non-resistance. Not dramatic power, not forceful power, but grounded power. You stop chasing signs. You stop fighting silence. You stop measuring progress. You allow life to move. And life responds differently to allowance than it does to pressure. A question that signals surrender. There is one question that signals true surrender. If nothing changes, am I still okay? Not numb, not resigned, but okay. When the answer becomes yes, even softly, control has loosened its grip. Surrender is not the end of the journey. It is the end of inner war. It is where love stops being a struggle and becomes a state of being. In the next part, we will explore what happens after surrender, how energy reorganizes itself, and why alignment often follows when force is removed. Because the moment you stop trying to control love, love finally knows where to land. What happens after surrender? When energy reorganizes itself, surrender does not end the twin flame journey, changes its physics. Up until surrender, most of the journey feels like resistance meeting resistance, fear meeting fear, expectation colliding with uncertainty. After surrender, something subtle but profound begins to happen. Energy reorganizes itself, not because you forced it, not because you figured it out, but because the struggle that distorted it has finally been removed. The quiet phase most people don't talk about. After surrender, there is often a quiet phase. No dramatic signs. No instant reunion. No fireworks. And this confuses many people. They expect something to happen immediately, but instead things feel neutral, calmer, slower, less charged. This is not stagnation. This is integration. For the first time, your nervous system is not bracing against reality. Your energy is no longer leaking outward through longing, fear, or control. It is coming back home. Why things may feel empty at first. Many people mistake this phase for loss. They say, "I don't feel the intensity anymore. I don't feel the same pull." Did the connection fade? What actually faded was distortion. Intensity fueled by fear creates emotional highs and lows. When fear leaves, the drama leaves with it. What remains is quieter but truer. Like the difference between a storm and the ocean beneath it. Energy begins to recenter around you. One of the first shifts after surrender is that your life energy stops orbiting around the twin flame connection. Your attention naturally returns to your body, your work, your creativity, your present life. Not as a distraction, not as avoidance, but as a rebalancing. You are no longer living around the connection. The connection now lives within you. This is energetic sovereignty. The end of obsession is not the end of love. This is a crucial distinction. Obsession dissolves. Love remains. You no longer need to check constantly, interpret silence, analyze every feeling, but you can still feel warmth, affection, recognition. Love becomes spacious rather than consuming. This is what soul-level love feels like, when it is no longer mixed with survival instincts. How the external reality responds to internal alignment. Here is a truth that often surprises people. When internal resistance ends, external dynamics often shift. Not always immediately, not always obviously, but alignment creates movement. Sometimes this looks like unexpected communication, emotional softening on both sides, unresolved issues coming to the surface. Sometimes it looks like clarity that reunion is not required, a peaceful detachment, a sense of completion without closure. Both are valid outcomes, because the goal was never a specific form. The goal was alignment. Reunion is not the reward for surrender. This must be said clearly. Reunion is not a prize. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is not proof that you did it right. Reunion, when it happens, is a byproduct of alignment. And alignment means both souls standing in wholeness, neither seeking completion through the other. Love flowing without fear. If those conditions are present, reunion can occur naturally. If not, the connection still fulfills its purpose internally. When release becomes the higher alignment. For some twin flames, surrender leads not to reunion, but to release. And this is often misunderstood as failure. But release does not mean the connection was false. It means the lesson was integrated. Release feels different than loss. Loss feels empty. Release feels complete. You no longer grasp. You no longer ache. There may be tenderness, but no attachment. This is not heartbreak. This is maturity. The nervous system after surrender. One of the most tangible changes after surrender is how your body responds to thoughts of the connection. Before surrender, tight chest, shallow breath, emotional spikes. After surrender, steadier breath, softer emotional response, grounded presence. Your body no longer interprets the connection as a threat. And when the body feels safe, intuition becomes clearer. Synchronicities change their tone. Interestingly, synchronicities often continue, but they feel different. Before surrender, signs felt urgent, like clues you had to decode. After surrender, they feel gentle, like reminders rather than instructions. You no longer chase meaning. Meaning finds you. Life expands again. One of the most beautiful effects of surrender is the quiet expansion of life. New interests emerge. Creativity returns. Joy reappears in unexpected places. Not because you forgot the connection, but because it no longer consumes your identity. You realize, I am more than this story. And that realization does not diminish the love. Freeze it. Why some people feel guilt after surrender. A surprising emotion that can arise is guilt. Guilt for feeling okay. Guilt for laughing again. Guilt for not hurting as much. This guilt is often tied to the belief that suffering equals devotion. But love does not require pain to be real. Surrender releases that belief. And with it, unnecessary suffering. The new relationship with uncertainty. After surrender, uncertainty no longer feels hostile. You stop demanding answers from the future. You trust yourself to meet whatever comes. This is not blind faith. This is self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of all healthy connection. A subtle but powerful question. There is a question that naturally arises after surrender. If everything stayed exactly as it is, could I still live a meaningful life? When the answer becomes yes, you have reached integration, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped postponing your life. The twin flame journey after integration. After integration, the twin flame journey no longer feels like a chase. Feels like wisdom earned, depth embodied, love refined. Whether the connection manifests externally or not, its impact is permanent. You are not the same person who entered it. And that was always the point. Surrender is not where the journey ends. It is where distortion ends. From here, everything that unfolds, reunion, release, or something in between, emerges from clarity rather than fear. And clarity is the highest form of love. In the next part, we can explore how to live from this integrated state, how to recognize alignment in daily life, and how twin flame love evolves beyond longing into quiet truth. Because once energy reorganizes itself, life no longer feels like waiting, feels like home. Living in alignment, when the twin flame journey becomes a way of being. At some point, the twin flame journey stops feeling like a journey. There is no longer a sense of movement toward something, no destination to reach, no question demanding an answer. Instead, there is alignment. And alignment is not an event. It is a way of being. Alignment is not a mood, it is a state. Many people think alignment means feeling good all the time, peaceful, loving, centered. But alignment is not the absence of discomfort. It is the absence of inner division. You may still feel sadness. You may still feel longing. You may still feel grief. But these emotions no longer fragment you. They move through you, not against you. You are not fighting yourself anymore. And that changes how everything is experienced. The end of the inner argument. Before alignment, there is an inner argument running quietly in the background. I should be over this. I shouldn't feel this way. I need to be more healed. I need to let go more. Alignment ends that argument. Not because the questions are answered, but because they are no longer needed. You stop correcting your inner experience. You allow it. And allowance creates coherence. How daily life changes after alignment. One of the first signs of living in alignment is how ordinary life begins to feel different. Not dramatic, not spiritualized, just real. You wake up without immediately checking emotional temperature. You move through your day without constant self-monitoring. You make decisions based on clarity, not emotional urgency. Life becomes less about interpretation and more about participation. You are present again. The twin flame is no longer the reference point. This is subtle but crucial. In alignment, the twin flame is no longer the reference point for your inner world. Your worth does not rise or fall based on their actions. Your peace does not depend on contact or silence. Your sense of purpose does not orbit the connection. This does not mean the connection disappears. It means it is no longer central to your identity. You are. And that is how it should be. Love without negotiation. One of the clearest markers of alignment is that love no longer feels like a negotiation. You are not asking, if I love less, will I hurt less? If I detach more, will I get closer? If I heal faster, will I be rewarded? Love simply exists. Without strategy. Without leverage. Without conditions. And paradoxically, this makes love stronger. Because it is no longer trying to protect itself. Boundaries become natural, not defensive. Before alignment, boundaries are often reactive. You set them to avoid pain, to regain control, to protect yourself from disappointment. After alignment, boundaries arise naturally. You know what feels aligned, what feels draining, what you are available for. You do not explain excessively. You do not justify. You simply choose. This is not withdrawal. This is discernment. The relationship with desire changes. Alignment does not eliminate desire, transforms it. Desire is no longer desperate. It is no longer hungry. It is no longer fused with fear. You may still want reunion. You may still imagine shared experiences. But desire no longer feels like survival, feels like preference. And preference does not control you. Living without the need for resolution. One of the most liberating aspects of alignment is the release of the need for closure. You no longer need explanations, apologies, confessions. You understand that some truths are felt, not spoken. Some connections complete themselves internally, long before they complete externally. This does not create bitterness. It creates peace. Alignment reveals the purpose of the journey. From this state, the twin flame journey makes sense. Not intellectually, but experientially. You see that it was never about romantic fulfillment, permanente union, a perfect outcome. It was about returning you to yourself, about stripping away unconscious dependency, identity confusion, fear-based love, and what remains is clarity. How alignment affects future relationships. Alignment recalibrates how you relate to everyone. You no longer tolerate emotional chaos as passion. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer abandon yourself to maintain connection. Whether you meet your twin flame again or not, you will not love the same way again. You will love from presence, from choice, from wholeness. The quiet confidence of alignment. There is a quiet confidence that comes with alignment. Not arrogance, not certainty, but trust. Trust in your ability to respond. Trust in your capacity to feel. Trust in life's intelligence. You stop asking, "Will I be okay?" Because you already are. When the twin flame reappears in alignment, if reunion occurs after alignment, feels different. There is no rush. No emotional flooding. No power struggle. Connection feels mutual, grounded, human. And if reunion does not occur, there is no devastation, only acceptance, because your life is no longer on hold. Alignment is the end of waiting. This brings us back to where the journey began. Waiting. Waiting for a message. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for love to arrive. Alignment ends waiting. Not because you got what you wanted, but because you stopped postponing your life. You are no longer oriented toward the future. You are rooted in now. A life that no longer revolves around proof. In alignment, you do not need proof that the connection was real. Its impact is proof. You are more aware, more grounded, more whole. That is the evidence. And no external validation can add to it. The final shift. The final shift is this. The twin flame journey stops being something that happened to you. It becomes something that formed you. And from this place there is gratitude, even for the pain. Not because the pain was necessary, but because it was integrated. Living in alignment means you no longer ask love to complete you. You bring completion to love. You meet connection from fullness, not lack. And from here, whatever unfolds, does so without fear. Because you are no longer waiting for life to begin. You are living it. Reunion, release, or redefinition. How the twin flame story truly ends. At some point, every twin flame journey arrives at a question that feels final. It may not be spoken out loud, but it lives quietly beneath the surface. So how does this end? Do we reunite? Do we let go? Do we move on? This question carries weight because it assumes something important. That the journey must resolve into a single clear outcome. But the deeper truth is this. The twin flame journey does not end the way the mind expects. It completes itself in a far more subtle way. The myth of the perfect ending. Most people enter the twin flame journey with an unspoken fantasy. A fantasy shaped by stories, spiritual teachings, and hope. It looks like dramatic reunion, unconditional love,
permanente togetherness,
everything finally making sense. And when reality doesn't mirror this image, disappointment sets in. But here is the uncomfortable truth. That fantasy belongs to the ego, not the soul. The soul is not interested in perfect endings. The soul is interested in truth. Why the mind needs a label? The mind wants certainty. It wants to label the outcome. We reunited. We failed. We moved on. Labels create closure. But soul-level experiences rarely fit clean categories. They are formative rather than conclusive. They change you, and then continue to live inside you. Reunion. When it happens from wholeness. Let's speak honestly about reunion. Yes, reunion can happen. But when it happens from alignment, it looks nothing like the fantasy. There is no emotional explosion.
no dramatic confession.
No sense of finally. Instead, there is recognition. Calm. Mutual presence. Equality. Two people meeting. Not two wounds colliding. Reunion after alignment is quiet. And because it is quiet, many people miss it. They expect intensity. But what arrives is steadiness. Reunion is not proof of success. This must be stated clearly. Reunion is not proof that the journey was successful. And lack of reunion is not proof that it failed. Reunion is simply one possible expression of alignment. Nothing more. Nothing less. When reunion happens, it is not because someone waited long enough, healed enough, or suffered enough. It happens because both individuals became available to meet without distortion. Release, when completion happens internally. For many twin flames, completion arrives as release. Not dramatic separation. Not bitterness. Not denial. But a soft internal closing. The connection no longer pulls. The longing no longer aches. The story no longer needs revisiting. There may still be affection, gratitude, tenderness, but no attachment. Release feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years, realizing you are whole without needing the other to confirm it. This is not loss. This is resolution. Why release often feels like failure at first. The ego resists release. Because release does not validate the original fantasy. Feels like, so what was all that for? But release is not the absence of meaning. It is meaning that no longer needs form. The love remains, but it no longer demands expression. Redefinition. The outcome few people expect. There is a third possibility that rarely gets discussed. Redefinition. This is when the connection does not disappear, but it no longer fits the label twin flame, as you once understood it. It may transform into deep respect, spiritual kinship, creative inspiration, a silent inner presence. The relationship is no longer romantic, but it is not erased. It is integrated. This outcome confuses people because it defies narrative structure. There is no climax, no ending scene, just a quiet shift in meaning. Why all three outcomes are valid. Reunion, release, redefinition. These are not hierarchies. They are expressions of alignment. Each serves a different soul configuration. Each completes the journey in a different way. The mistake is assuming only one of them is right. The question that clarifies the outcome. Instead of asking, what happened between us? The aligned question becomes, what happened to me because of this? If the answer includes increased self-trust, emotional sovereignty, deeper presence, clearer boundaries, then the journey fulfilled its purpose. Regardless of the external outcome, the twin flame journey is not about possession. One of the deepest illusions this journey dismantles is the idea that love must be possessed to be real. Soul-level love does not seek ownership. It seeks truth. And truth does not always require permanence. Sometimes it requires transformation. Why some journeys don't resolve in this lifetime? This is a difficult truth, but an honest one. Some twin flame connections are not meant to fully resolve within one lifetime. Not because they failed, but because their purpose was to awaken, not conclude. This does not mean unfinished business. It means the impact extends beyond form. And that is not something the mind can comfortably grasp. When the story stops being the center, the true ending arrives when the story itself loses importance. When you no longer replay it, no longer define yourself by it, no longer measure your growth against it, the journey becomes something you carry, not something you chase. This is completion. Quiet test of completion. There is a simple way to know whether the journey has completed itself within you. Ask yourself, if this connection never changes again, do I feel at peace with who I've become? If the answer is yes, the ending has already occurred. The soul's perspective on endings. From the soul's perspective, nothing ends. Experiences integrate. Lessons embed. Love evolves. What the mind calls an ending, the soul experiences as a return to self. The final reframe. The twin flame journey is not a love story. It is an awakening story. And awakening stories do not end with happily ever after. They end with clarity, with presence, with freedom. So whether your path led to reunion, release, or redefinition, know this: you did not lose. You were reshaped. You were refined. You were returned to yourself. And that was always the true conclusion. The highest frequency of love, living beyond the twin flame label. There is a moment, often quiet, often unannounced, when the twin flame label begins to fall away. Not because it was wrong, not because the connection was imagined, but because it is no longer needed. This is the moment many people never expect. The moment when the journey does not escalate, but simplifies. And in that simplicity, something profound is revealed. when the label no longer defines the experience. At the beginning, the label twin flame brings meaning. It helps you understand why the connection felt different, why the separation was devastating, why ordinary explanations fell short. The label gives language to the ineffable, but eventually the label can become a limitation. It can trap the experience in a story, instead of allowing it to evolve into truth. Living beyond the label does not mean denying the journey. It means you no longer need a framework to justify your inner knowing. The highest frequency of love is not attachment. Here is the realization that marks true completion. The highest frequency of love does not attach. It does not cling to form. It does not insist on outcome. It does not require permanence to be real. This kind of love is not passive. It is powerful because it is free. Free from fear. Free from bargaining. Free from the need to prove itself. Love that exists without a story. When you live beyond the twin flame label, love becomes something you are, not something you pursue. You stop telling yourself, this love is special because of who it is with. Instead, you realize, this love is special because of who I became. The connection no longer needs to be revisited, analyzed, or protected. Its work is done, and what remains is essence. The end of spiritual identity. One of the most subtle shifts at this stage is the dissolution of spiritual identity. You no longer see yourself as the awakened one, the wounded one, the one who understands twin flames. You are simply present. You do not need to explain your experience. You do not need others to validate it. Truth no longer asks for witnesses. Love without the need to be seen. At this frequency, love does not need to be mirrored to exist. You can love without being loved back in the same way, and not diminish yourself. You can remember without longing. You can honor without attachment. You can feel connection without expectation. This is not detachment from humanity. It is intimacy without fear. Why this stage feels ordinary? Many people miss this stage because it does not feel spiritual. There are no dramatic signs, no intense emotions, no cosmic symbolism. Life feels normal, but this normalcy is sacred. It means the nervous system has integrated the lesson. You are no longer living in a heightened state of survival or seeking. You are grounded. The return to simple presence. Living beyond the twin flame label brings you back to the present moment. You begin to notice the sound of your breath, the quiet joy of routine, the subtle peace of being alive. You stop measuring experiences. You stop asking, is this part of my journey? Everything is part of your life now. Love expands beyond one person. At this stage, love is no longer concentrated. It spreads into friendships, into creativity, into service, into the way you speak to yourself. The heart is no longer narrowed by fixation. It is available, and availability is the highest form of love. The twin flame as a catalyst, not a destination. This is the ultimate reframe. The twin flame was not the destination. It was the catalyst. Cracked you open, so you could experience love without conditions. Once that capacity is embodied, the form that awakened it is no longer central. Gratitude replaces attachment. Living without waiting completely. At this frequency, waiting ends entirely. You are not waiting for reunion. You are not waiting for closure. You are not waiting for confirmation. Life is happening and you are in it. You make choices without referencing the past. You love without negotiating the future. This is freedom. How relationships feel after this awakening. Relationships after this stage feel different. Quieter. More honest. Less performative. You are no longer trying to recreate intensity, avoid abandonment, prove worth. You meet people as they are, and you meet yourself as you are. The soul's version of happily ever after. The soul's version of fulfillment is not eternal romance. It is inner coherence. A sense that nothing is missing, nothing needs fixing, nothing needs chasing. This is peace. Not the absence of desire, but the absence of inner conflict. The final truth about the twin flame journey. Here is the truth few people talk about. The twin flame journey ends when you no longer need it to define you. When love is no longer something that happened to you, but something that flows through you. That is the highest frequency. A final question to sit with. Before we close this journey together, sit with this question gently. If I never explained this experience to anyone, would it still have transformed me? If the answer is yes, then the journey succeeded. You were never meant to wait forever. You were meant to awaken, integrate, and live. The twin flame was not the love of your life. It was the love that taught you how to love life. Love in action. When awakening becomes how you live, there is a stage beyond understanding, beyond healing, beyond integration. It is the stage where love moves into action. Not action driven by urgency, not action fueled by proving anything, but action that flows naturally, from a heart no longer divided. This is where the twin flame journey quietly transforms, from a personal awakening, into a way of being in the world. When insight is no longer enough. After everything you've experienced, the intensity, the separation, the surrender, the alignment, there comes a moment when insight alone feels incomplete. You understand the journey. You have made peace with it. You are no longer waiting. And yet, something asks gently, how does this love live through me now? Not as a concept, but as practice. Not as memory, but as presence. Integration is proven in ordinary moments. True integration is not measured by how clearly you can explain the twin flame journey. It is measured by how you speak when you're tired, how you respond when you're misunderstood, how you treat yourself on days with no meaning attached. Awakening that remains abstract eventually stagnates. Awakening that enters daily life becomes embodied wisdom. Love becomes a capacity, not a story. At this stage, love is no longer associated with one person or experience. It becomes a capacity, a way you listen, a way you pause before reacting, a way you allow complexity without collapsing. You notice. You are less defensive, less reactive, less interested in being right. Not because you suppress yourself, but because there is less inner conflict demanding expression. The shift from healing to offering. Earlier stages of the journey are inward-facing. You heal. You integrate. You recalibrate. Eventually, the energy shifts outward. Not as sacrifice, not as obligation, but as a quiet desire to contribute. You may feel drawn to creating something meaningful, supporting others through presence, offering clarity without preaching. This is not about becoming a guide or teacher. It is about becoming available. Service without self-erasure. One of the dangers at this stage is mistaking service for self-erasure. Love in action does not mean abandoning boundaries, fixing others, absorbing emotional weight that isn't yours. Integrated love is discerning. You give without depleting. You care without rescuing. You support without losing yourself. This balance is the fruit of the entire journey. How relationships change at this level. Relationships begin to feel simpler. Not easier. Simpler. You communicate directly. You listen without preparing responses. You leave situations that require self-betrayal. Love is no longer something you chase or negotiate. It is something you bring. When pain appears again, and it will. Integration does not mean pain never returns. Loss still happens. Disappointment still arises. Grief still visits. The difference is this. Pain no longer defines you. You do not spiral. You do not interpret it as regression. You do not question your worth. Pain becomes information, not identity. The twin flame energy transforms into compassion. At this stage, the energy that once fixated on one person often transforms into compassion for many. You recognize pain in others more easily. You respond with less judgment. Not because you are superior, but because you remember. You know what it feels like to lose yourself in longing. And that memory softens you, living without the need to be special. One of the quiet gifts of this stage is the release of spiritual exceptionalism. You no longer need your journey to be unique or rare. You no longer need others to understand it. You are comfortable being ordinary. And in that ordinariness, something profoundly human emerges. Love expressed through integrity. Love in action shows up as integrity. You do what aligns even when no one is watching. You speak truth gently, even when silence would be easier. You choose rest even when productivity is praised. These are not dramatic gestures. They are consistent ones. A life that no longer revolves around healing. Eventually, healing becomes a background process. You don't identify as healing anymore. You are living. You trust yourself to meet what arises. You do not return to old frameworks, unless they serve the present moment. This is emotional adulthood. The subtle joy of contribution. There is a quiet joy that comes from this stage. Not excitement, not euphoria, but contentment. You feel useful, not because you perform, but because you are grounded. You see your life touching others in ways you cannot trace, and you don't need to. A question that guides this stage. Here is a question that naturally guides you now. What wants to move through me today? Not, what should I do? Not, what will be rewarded? Just, what is alive in me? This question keeps love dynamic and honest. When the twin flame appears in memory, sometimes the twin flame reappears. In dreams, in memory, in reflection. There is no spike. Noche. Just recognition. You may smile. You may feel gratitude. And then you return to your life. This is integration. The journey as a preparation for presence. Seen from this stage, the entire twin flame journey was preparation. Preparation to feel deeply without collapsing. Love fully without clinging. Stand alone without closing. The connection trained your nervous system to hold intensity and still remain open. That capacity now belongs to you. Love in action is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It lives in how you show up when no one is measuring your growth. The twin flame journey did not end in understanding. It ended in embodiment. And embodiment is love made visible. Gentle invitation. As you move forward, you don't need to carry the story anymore. Let the essence guide you. Let love move. Let life be enough. The legacy of the journey. What remains when everything else falls away? There comes a point when even reflection becomes unnecessary. When the story no longer needs retelling. When the questions no longer need answers. When the journey no longer needs meaning. This is not emptiness. This is completion. When the journey stops asking something of you. For a long time, the twin flame journey demanded your attention. It asked you to feel deeply, to confront fear, to surrender control, to return to yourself again and again. But eventually the journey stops asking. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded. It gave you what it came to give. And now it steps aside. What remains is not a memory. What remains is not the person. Not the story, not the intensity. What remains is capacity. Your capacity to stay present in uncertainty, love without bargaining, feel loss without disappearing, live without postponing joy. This is the legacy. It does not fade. The quiet maturity that follows awakening. After everything has been integrated, there is a quiet maturity that settles in. You no longer rush insight. You no longer dramatize pain. You no longer seek experiences to validate growth. Life becomes sufficient. Not perfect. Not easy. But sufficient. You trust yourself to meet it. Love without a center. One of the most radical shifts at this stage is that love no longer has a center. It is not focused on one person, one outcome, one story. Love becomes diffuse. It lives in the way you walk, the way you listen, the way you choose honesty over comfort. It is no longer concentrated. It is embodied. The end of spiritual seeking. This is often misunderstood. People think the end of seeking means apathy. It does not. It means clarity. You stop collecting teachings. You stop identifying as a seeker. You stop defining yourself by transformation. You are not against growth. You simply no longer chase it. Growth happens naturally now. When silence feels like truth. Earlier stages of the journey were loud. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. At the end, silence becomes more trustworthy than thought. You do not need constant inner dialogue. You respond to life directly. This is not emptiness. This is intimacy with reality. The twin flame is a footnote, not a title. One of the clearest signs of completion is that the twin flame no longer defines your narrative. It becomes a chapter, not the book. Important, formative, but not central. Your identity expands beyond it. Gratitude without attachment. There is gratitude here, but not nostalgia. You do not wish to return. You do not romanticize the pain. You simply acknowledge, that shaped me. And then you live. When love no longer needs expression. At this stage, love does not need to be expressed to exist. You do not need reunion, confession, acknowledgement. You are not withholding. You are complete. Love has become internal coherence, a life oriented toward presence. Your life is no longer oriented toward the past or future. You make decisions based on alignment, honesty, capacity. You rest when needed. You act when called. You let go when complete. This is wisdom without performance. The legacy is subtle, and that is its strength. The true legacy of the twin flame journey is not something others can easily see. It shows up as steadiness under pressure, softness without weakness, discernment without judgment. You do not announce it. You live it. The journey did not give you answers. This is important. The twin flame journey did not give you answers. It gave you yourself. Your nervous system recalibrated. Your heart refined. Your identity clarified. You are no longer fragmented. When love stops being a project, love is no longer something to manage, fix, or optimize. It is no longer a project. It is a state. You do not try to love better. You live honestly, and love follows. A final reframe. If there is one final reframe to carry forward, it is this. The twin flame journey was not about union with another. It was about union within. And that union does not end. It becomes the ground you walk on. The question that no longer needs an answer. There was once a question that haunted you. Was it real? At this stage, the question dissolves. Because only real experiences leave real change. And you are changed. So this is not an ending. It is a settling. A deep exhale. A return to ordinary life. Infused with awareness. You do not need to carry the story anymore. Carry the presence instead.